Have you ever poured your heart into something, applied for your dream job, pitched an idea you believed in, or reached out to someone you admired only to be met with silence or a crushing no? That sting of rejection can feel like a door slamming shut, leaving you questioning your worth or doubting your path. But what if I told you that rejection isn't the end of the story? In fact, it might just be the hidden key to your greatest reinvention. 2,000 years ago, the Stoics, those unshakable philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome, crafted a radical strategy for transforming rejection into fuel for growth. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of history's most influential thinkers, put it simply: it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That shift in perception, from victim to architect of your own resilience, is the heart of the Stoic approach. Imagine standing at a crossroads where every no doesn't diminish you but defines you, not by the rejection itself, but by how you choose to respond. The Stoics didn't just preach this idea, they lived it. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor who faced betrayal and endless political strife, wrote in his private journals about using adversity as a whetstone to sharpen his character. Seneca, exiled and stripped of his wealth, called setbacks the raw material for greatness. These weren't just comforting words, they were battle-tested tools for turning life's hardest blows into stepping stones. And here's the most liberating part: this ancient wisdom isn't locked away in dusty scrolls. It's a living, breathing strategy you can use today to reframe rejection as redirection, a chance to rebuild yourself stronger than before. This video is your guide to that transformation. We'll explore how Stoicism's timeless principles can help you detach from the pain of no and reclaim your power. You'll discover how to separate what you can't control: other people's choices, unpredictable circumstances, from what you can: your effort, your perspective, and your willingness to grow. By the end, you won't just see rejection differently, you'll welcome it as a teacher, because the Stoics knew something we often forget: the path to becoming unshakable isn't paved with constant approval. It's built by mastering the art of the comeback, one thoughtful, resilient step at a time. So if you're ready to turn those closed doors into bridges to something better, let's begin. The Stoics saw rejection not as a personal failure, but as a simple fact, no different than rain falling or leaves changing color. To them, events in life were neutral until we assigned meaning to them. Marcus Aurelius called this objective judgment, the practice of stripping away emotional reactions to see things as they truly are, not as our fears or desires paint them. Picture this: you spend weeks preparing for a job interview, crafting the perfect answers, only to receive a generic rejection email, the Stoic response. That email isn't good or bad by itself, it's just information. The pain comes from the story we attach to it: I'm not good enough, or I'll never succeed. But what if, like Marcus, you could pause and ask, what does this actually mean? Maybe it means the role wasn't the right fit. Maybe the hiring manager had a cousin applying. Maybe it's just a sign to refine your skills. The rejection itself doesn't dictate your worth, only your interpretation does. Think of it like weather. A storm isn't out to get you, it's just a storm. Rejection works the same way. When a friend cancels plans or a client turns down your proposal, the event is neutral. The suffering begins when we internalize it, turning "they said no" into "I'm unworthy." But here's the twist: the Stoics believed this moment of pain is also your moment of power. By recognizing that rejection is external, separate from your core self, you reclaim the ability to choose your response. Seneca, who faced exile and countless setbacks, wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction." That friction, the nose, the closed doors isn't your enemy. It's the grit that shapes you into someone unshakable. So here's a question to sit with. How often do you let rejection write the story of who you are? When you hear no, does it become a verdict on your potential, or just a single page in a much larger book? The Stoics would urge you to see it as the latter. Because every time you separate the event from the narrative, you're not just coping with rejection, you're mastering it. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who transformed his own suffering into wisdom, gave us perhaps the most liberating idea in human history, the dichotomy of control. Picture a circle. Inside it, write everything within your power, your thoughts, your efforts, your reactions. Outside it, everything else, other people's opinions, outcomes, even the past. That line between the two, that's where your freedom lies. He famously said, "Some things are within our power while others are not." Sounds simple, but here's why it's revolutionary. Rejection lies firmly outside that circle. The no itself, uncontrollable, but your next move, that's entirely yours. Let's break this down with something we've all faced, a job rejection. You can't control the hiring manager's mood that day, the other candidates, or whether your resume got lost in a digital pile. But you can control how many applications you send, the time you spend refining your skills, even the way you choose to interpret that no. Epictetus called this inner freedom, the unshakable space where no external event can dictate your worth unless you let it. Imagine carrying that mindset into every area of life. A failed relationship, you can't control someone else's feelings, but you can choose to grow from the experience. A rejected creative project, you can't force someone to appreciate your work, but you can keep creating. Here's a practical way to train this muscle. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. On the left, list everything about rejection you can't control: the other person's decision, timing, even luck. On the right, everything you can, your preparation, your persistence, the lessons you extract. Most people spend their energy agonizing over the left column. The Stoics, they pour every ounce into the right, because here's the secret. When you stop fighting the uncontrollable, you unlock a superpower. Suddenly, rejection isn't a verdict, it's data. It's not a wall, it's a compass. Epictetus, who was crippled by a cruel master as a young slave, could have let his circumstances define him. Instead, he taught that no one can hurt you unless you permit them to. That's the heart of this practice. Every time you face rejection, you're handed a choice. Will you let it shrink you, or will you use it as fuel to expand what's truly yours to command? The uncontrollable will always exist, but so will your ability to stand firmly in the one place no rejection can touch, your inner citadel of effort, growth, and relentless forward motion. There's a phrase that echoes through Stoic philosophy like a drumbeat: Amor, Fati, Latin for love of fate. It's more than just accepting what happens. It's about embracing every twist, every no, every detour with open arms. Friedrich Nietzsche, centuries later, would call it my formula for greatness, not merely enduring life's blows, but loving them as necessary steps in your journey. Picture Seneca, the wealthy philosopher suddenly exiled to a barren island by a jealous emperor. Instead of crumbling, he wrote letters about the clarity and freedom he found there. The very rejection meant to break him became the soil where his greatest wisdom grew. That's Amor Fati in action, the art of turning life's sharpest edges into tools for carving a better self. Think of it like this: rejection isn't just something to survive, it's something to cultivate. When a door slams shut, we're conditioned to pound on it or walk away dejected. But what if you paused and asked, what if this is the path? The Stoics believed fate was like a river. Fighting the current exhausts you, but swimming with it might carry you somewhere unexpected. Take the inventor James Dyson. Before creating his revolutionary vacuum, he faced 5,126 rejections from manufacturers. Most would have quit at rejection number 10, but Dyson, he called each no a lesson that refined his design. That's Amor Fati, not just gritting your teeth through failure, but seeing it as the universe nudging you toward a better version of your goal. Here's the radical truth hidden in this ancient idea. Rejection often clears space for what's meant for you. When a relationship ends, it might free you to meet someone who truly aligns with you. When a job falls through, it could push you toward a path you'd never have considered otherwise. The Stoics would urge you to look for the hidden yes buried in every no. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way, not a barrier, but the very route forward." So next time you face rejection, try this reframe. What if this isn't blocking my path, but redirecting me to a better one? Consider how many breakthroughs began as rejections. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter manuscript was turned down 12 times. The Beatles were told guitar groups were on the way out by a recording studio. Had they taken those no's as final, the world would have lost stories and songs that shaped generations. That's the power of Amor Fati. It transforms you from a victim of circumstance to an alchemist, turning leaden setbacks into golden opportunities. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been resisting a no that might actually be a gift in disguise? Because loving your fate doesn't mean pretending rejection doesn't sting. It means trusting that even the sting has purpose, like a bee pollinating the next flower on your path. Seneca had a peculiar habit, one that might sound counterintuitive at first. He called it premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. Before stepping into any important meeting or embarking on a new venture, he would close his eyes and vividly imagine everything that could go wrong. Rejection, failure, humiliation, but here's the twist. He wasn't practicing pessimism. He was building immunity. By mentally rehearsing setbacks, he stripped them of their power to shock or derail him. In one of his letters, he wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." It's like emotional inoculation, a small dose of imagined adversity to prepare you for the real thing. Take a moment to apply this to your own life. Imagine you're about to pitch a bold idea at work. Instead of just visualizing success, the applause, the approval, try Seneca's method. Picture the room going silent. See your manager's skeptical frown. Hear the polite but firm "we'll pass." Now ask yourself, if that happened, what would I do next? Maybe you'd refine the pitch, seek feedback, or realize the idea needs more time to develop. The sting of rejection dulls when you've already walked through the scenario in your mind. That's the genius of premeditatio malorum. It transforms fear into preparation. Modern psychology backs this ancient practice. Studies on stress inoculation training show that people who mentally rehearse challenges, from public speaking to job interviews, handle real-life pressure with far more resilience. It's why athletes visualize missed shots before big games, or why performers practice recovering from mistakes. The goal isn't to dwell on negativity, it's to dismantle the unknown. Because rejection hurts most when it catches us off guard. But when we've already met it in our minds, it becomes familiar territory, a hurdle we've practiced clearing. Here's a practical way to try it today. Before your next vulnerable moment, asking for a raise, confessing feelings, submitting creative work, pause and ask, what's the worst that could happen? Not as a spiral into anxiety, but as a strategic exercise. If the worst-case scenario unfolded, how would you adapt? What strengths would you draw on? Often, you'll realize the worst isn't catastrophic, just uncomfortable. And discomfort, as the Stoics knew, is where growth begins. Seneca's letters reveal a profound truth. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The dread of rejection often outweighs the rejection itself. By facing it head-on in your mind, you reclaim control. You're no longer at the mercy of chance. You're the architect of your response. So next time fear whispers, "What if they say no?" lean in and reply, "Then I'll already know how to turn that no into my next step forward." That shift from avoidance to readiness is how rejection stops being a threat and starts becoming a teacher. Marcus Aurelius saw life as a grand gymnasium, a place where every challenge, every setback, was just another piece of equipment designed to strengthen your character. Think about how athletes train. They don't avoid the burn of sore muscles. They lean into it, knowing it's the only way to grow stronger. Rejection works the same way. When someone says no, it's not a verdict on your worth. It's a weight added to the bar you're lifting. The heavier it feels, the more it's shaping you. In his private journals, Marcus wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the Stoic mindset in motion. Every rejection isn't a roadblock, but a resistance band pulling you toward resilience. Consider how a boxer trains. They don't just practice punches, they practice taking hits. Why? Because getting comfortable with impact is the only way to stay standing when it matters. Rejection is your sparring partner in life's gym. Each no is a punch you learn to roll with, a chance to refine your footing. The entrepreneur who faces 100 rejections before a breakthrough isn't unlucky, they're in training. The artist whose work is ignored today isn't failing, they're building the emotional calluses needed to keep creating. The Stoics called this ascesis, the deliberate practice of enduring discomfort to master your responses. Here's where the metaphor deepens. In a gym, you wouldn't curse the dumbbell for being heavy. You'd adjust your grip and lift. Yet when life hands us rejection, we often blame the weight instead of focusing on our form. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, illness, and endless political intrigue as emperor, but his journals reveal a man who saw each crisis as a training session. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That shift from "why is this happening to me" to "what is this revealing in me" is the essence of Stoic growth. So here's your challenge. Next time rejection stings, pause and ask, what muscle is this meant to strengthen? Is it patience, humility, creativity, persistence? The answer will tell you exactly where to focus your effort, because the gymnasium of life doesn't care if you're tired. It cares if you're growing, and sometimes the heaviest weights, the ones that feel impossible to lift, are the ones that sculpt you into someone unbreakable. History's most resilient figures didn't dodge rejection, they trained with it. Thomas Edison reframed his 10,000 failed experiments as steps toward the light bulb, quipping, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's the Stoic athlete's mindset. Every no is a rep in your mental and emotional workout. Miss a promotion. That's endurance training. A project falls through. That's agility drills. The more you embrace the burn, the more you'll recognize rejection for what it truly is, not a punishment, but the universe's way of spotting you as you grow stronger. The Stoics believed character wasn't built in comfort. It was forged in the friction of setbacks. So next time life hands you a rejection, don't walk away from the weight. Grab it with both hands and ask, "What's this here to teach me?" Because the gymnasium never closes, and every drop of sweat, every moment of discomfort, is proof you're still in the game. Epictetus once observed that we suffer not because of events, but because of the stories our ego tells us about those events. Picture this: you post a carefully crafted photo online, only to watch it languish with half the likes of your usual posts. That sinking feeling, that's not just disappointment, it's your ego interpreting the lack of external validation as a threat. the Stoics saw ego as a prison of our own making, where every rejection becomes a personal indictment. But what if that sting is actually a signal, a chance to break free from the need for approval altogether? Modern life bombards us with opportunities to tie our worth to external metrics, job titles, social media engagement, even the number of people who remember our birthdays. The Stoics called this prosoch, or misplaced attachment. Epictetus, who taught that freedom begins when we stop conflating what happens with who we are, would argue that every rejection peels back another layer of ego's illusion. Imagine a musician who pours their heart into an album only to face harsh criticism. The ego screams, "They don't understand me." The Stoic responds, "Does their opinion change the music's truth?" That shift from seeking validation to valuing intrinsic worth is where real resilience begins. Social media offers the perfect case study. When a post flops or a comment goes ignored, the ego interprets it as social exile. But zoom out, that rejection is often just an algorithm's whim or a follower scrolling past during their commute. The Stoics would urge you to ask, why am I giving a stranger's thumb swipe power over my self-esteem? Humility, in their view, wasn't about self-denial. It was about accurate perception, recognizing that your value exists independently of applause or silence. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, still reminded himself daily, "You're just a shadow waving at other shadows. Stop taking yourself so seriously." Here's the paradox: the more we cling to ego's narrative, "I must be admired, I must succeed," the more rejection burns. But when we loosen that grip, no becomes neutral data, not a dagger. Think of a tree shedding leaves in autumn. It doesn't mourn each one, it trusts in cycles. The Stoic approach to rejection mirrors that wisdom. Every no that shakes your ego is secretly an invitation. What if you didn't need this to be happy? What if the job you didn't get, the invitation you missed, the ignored message were all steering you toward a version of success that doesn't hinge on others' whims? History's most enduring figures mastered this detachment. Maya Angelou, rejected by publishers early on, later said, "I'm grateful for every no I ever got. It forced me to find my own yes." That's Stoic humility in action. The realization that rejection often protects us from paths that would have shrunk our spirit. So next time ego flares up after a setback, try Epictetus's razor. Is this pain coming from the event or from my story about it? The answer might just reveal how light you could feel without that weight. Marcus Aurelius left us one of history's most powerful tools for transforming rejection into growth, not in a grand lecture, but in the pages of his private journal. Meditations, the personal notebook of a Roman emperor, wasn't filled with triumphs or flattery. It was a candid dialogue with himself, a space to reflect on setbacks and sharpen his resilience. You can harness that same practice today. Imagine sitting down after a rejection, a lost job, a faded friendship, a creative project that missed the mark, and asking, as Marcus did, "What is this here to teach me?" Journaling becomes your Stoic workshop where raw experience gets forged into wisdom. Start with this prompt: what part of this rejection was outside my control, and what part reflects my actions? The Stoics called this hypnomata, a practice of dissecting events to separate facts from stories. When a client rejects your proposal, jot down the tangible reasons they gave, then distinguish them from the fears whispering, "You're not good enough." Next, borrow Marcus's favorite question: how could I have responded better? Not with self-blame, but with clear-eyed honesty. Did you react defensively? Did you retreat or double down? This isn't about judgment, it's about pattern recognition. The goal is to spot where your energy is wasted on the uncontrollable and redirect it to what you can improve. Here's a line from Meditations to anchor your practice. Look closely at the cause, examine it from all sides. Apply this to a recent rejection. Was it truly about you, or a matter of timing, fit, or someone else's limitations? Now flip the script. What strength did this reveal in me? Maybe persistence, you applied anyway. Maybe courage, you risked vulnerability. Stoic journaling isn't just about dissecting pain, it's about mining it for gold. Try this tonight. Set aside 10 minutes to write about a recent no. Begin with the facts, what happened, free from emotional labels. Then explore 3 angles. What did I learn? How did my response serve me? What's one small step I can take tomorrow? This mirrors Seneca's nightly ritual, where he reviewed his day with the question, what weakness did I conquer today? Your journal becomes a mirror, reflecting not just the rejection, but the resilience growing in its wake. The brilliance of this practice lies in its simplicity. You don't need grand insights, just consistent reflection. Over time, you'll notice a shift. Rejections that once sent you spiraling become entries in a larger story of progress. Marcus didn't journal to dwell on setbacks. He wrote to refine his character. Your turn. Grab a notebook, pick up a pen, and let every no become a conversation with your wisest self. Because the page doesn't judge, it only asks, what will you make of this? And that's where reinvention begins. Imagine you've spent months crafting a business proposal, researching, refining, anticipating every question. You present it with confidence only to hear, thanks, but we're going in another direction. That sting, it's not just disappointment, it's your brain interpreting rejection as a verdict. But the Stoics would flip that script instantly. To them, that no isn't a failure, it's feedback. Seneca put it bluntly, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Every rejection is a signal, not about your worth, but about where to adjust, adapt, or persist. Let's break this down with that business proposal. When the client says no, most people focus on the emotional blow. But the Stoic pauses and asks, what's the objective truth here? Did they reject the pricing, the timeline, the core idea? Modern companies pay thousands for customer feedback, yet we often ignore the free, raw data hidden in rejection. Think of a tech startup pitching to investors. The first 10 say no. The ego screams, they don't get it. The Stoic entrepreneur, they're cataloging responses. 3 cited market size, 4 wanted more traction, 2 disliked the UI. Suddenly, rejection isn't a wall, it's a roadmap. This mirrors what psychologists call a growth mindset, but the Stoics framed it even deeper. They saw adversity as a dialogue. When Seneca was exiled, he didn't just endure it, he studied it. His letters reveal a man treating misfortune like a stern professor. What's this trying to show me? Apply that to your own life. A rejected manuscript isn't proof you're a bad writer. It's a chance to ask, did the pacing lag? Was the hook weak? A faded friendship might reveal where your boundaries need reinforcing. Feedback hides in every no waiting to be decoded. Here's the pivot that changes everything: detachment. Not apathy, but the ability to separate the event from the narrative. Picture a scientist analyzing data. They don't take a failed experiment personally, they refine their hypothesis. That's Stoic objective judgment in action. When a venture capitalist passes on your pitch, it's not a rejection of you, it's a single data point suggesting where to iterate. Even harsh criticism becomes useful when you ask, what part of this is true? Not to indict yourself, but to evolve. Seneca's exile produced his greatest works. J.K. Rowling's Rejections honed Harry Potter's pitch, the common thread. They treated no as directional, not definitive. So next time life hands you rejection, try this. Grab a notebook and divide the page. On one side, write the facts, what was actually said or done. On the other, your interpretation. Then cross out every assumption that isn't rooted in evidence. What's left? Pure feedback, the kind that doesn't diminish you, it builds you. Because the Stoics knew a secret, the most painful rejections often carry the clearest instructions. Your move isn't to argue with the data, it's to adjust your course and sail on. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." This radical idea that true power comes from releasing our grip on outcomes clashes with modern culture's obsession with results. We're taught to cling to expectations, the perfect job offer, the dream relationship, the viral success. But the Stoics saw this attachment as a trap. Imagine you've been dating someone for months, envisioning a future together, only to hear, "I don't see this going further." The pain isn't just in their words, it's in the weight of the story you'd already written, the future you'd already attached to them. Detachment isn't indifference, it's the quiet art of holding plans lightly. Consider how differently two people might process that dating rejection. The first replays every text, obsessing over what they did wrong, internalizing the no as proof they're unlovable. The second acknowledges the hurt, then asks, "Did I confuse my happiness with their participation in it?" That shift from "I need this to work" to "I'm complete either way" is Stoic detachment in action. Epictetus called desires chains, not because joy was forbidden, but because craving specific outcomes hands our peace to chance. When you detach, rejection doesn't disappear, it just loses its power to derail you. Modern life amplifies this struggle. We track likes, sales, and swipes as if they're report cards on our worth. But the Stoics would urge you to measure effort, not outcomes. Think of an actor auditioning for a role. They can rehearse relentlessly, deliver their best take, but the director's choice hinges on factors beyond their control: height, chemistry, even the producer's mood that morning. Attachment says, "I must book this role." Detachment says, "I control my preparation, the rest isn't mine to command." One mindset breeds agony, the other resilience. Here's where Stoicism surprises us. Detachment isn't passive. It's an active choice to invest fully while surrendering the illusion of control. A writer pouring heart into a novel doesn't stop caring, they simply stop conflating rejection with failure. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are brambles in the path, step aside." Not resignation, pragmatism. Every no in life is that bitter cucumber. You don't have to pretend it's sweet, you just refuse to let it spoil your appetite for what comes next. So next time you face a high-stakes moment, a pitch, a performance, a vulnerable conversation, try this reframe. What if I gave this my all, then let the outcome be what it is? Not as a hedge against disappointment, but as a declaration of sovereignty over your effort. The poet Rilke captured this when he wrote, "No feeling is final." Not the euphoria of yes, not the ache of no. Detachment whispers a liberating truth. You are not your results. You're the person who showed up, dared, and grew regardless of the reply. That's where real freedom begins. History remembers Cato the Younger not for his political victories, but for how he turned crushing defeats into lessons in unshakable integrity. When Julius Caesar seized power, Cato didn't just lose, he became the lone voice refusing to bend to tyranny. Exiled, mocked, and ultimately defeated, he never let rejection break his principles. His final act, choosing death over submission, wasn't surrender. It was the ultimate demonstration of control over the one thing no rejection can touch, his character. The Stoics didn't celebrate his death. They revered his refusal to let external forces dictate his worth. As Seneca wrote, Cato's greatness was beyond fortune's reach. That's the heart of Stoic resilience. When the world says no, you decide what that no means. Then there's Zeno, the merchant whose entire life pivoted on a single shipwreck. Stranded in Athens after losing his cargo, his wealth, his livelihood, he wandered into a bookstore and discovered Socrates' teachings. What most would call catastrophe became his catalyst. Instead of drowning in self-pity, he built a philosophy that would outlast empires. Zeno's story embodies the Stoic paradox. Sometimes rejection isn't the end of your path. It's the discovery that you were on the wrong one. The shipwreck didn't destroy him. It forced him to ask, if not this, then what? And in that question, Stoicism was born. These figures didn't just endure rejection, they weaponized it. Cato used political failure to expose corruption. Zeno transformed material loss into intellectual legacy. Their power came from a shared realization. Resilience isn't about bouncing back, it's about forging ahead with sharper clarity. Imagine applying that lens to modern setbacks. A layoff isn't just a loss, it's an invitation to ask, what work truly aligns with my values? A broken relationship isn't proof of unlovability. It's space to redefine what connection means. The Stoics didn't romanticize suffering, they mined it for direction. So here's a challenge: who's your Stoic role model? Not just historical figures, but anyone who's shown you how rejection can refine rather than define. Maybe it's the friend who turned a bankruptcy into a thriving small business, or the artist who used criticism to fuel their boldest work. Their stories matter because they prove resilience isn't innate, it's a choice repeated daily. As Marcus Aurelius scribbled in the margins of his journal, the blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it. That's the alchemy you're capable of. The next time life says no, ask yourself, what would Cato protect? What would Zeno build? Their answers might just reveal yours. The Stoics had a word for the invisible threads that connect all things: Sympathya. It's the idea that nothing happens in isolation, that every event, even rejection, is part of a larger tapestry being woven. Picture a sailor charting a course, only to be blown off course by a storm. At first, it feels like failure, but what if that storm was steering them away from hidden rocks or toward uncharted shores? That's Sympathya in action, the quiet intelligence of the universe nudging us toward paths we might have missed. Marcus Aurelius put it beautifully: what stands in the way becomes the way. Rejection isn't a dead end, it's a detour with purpose. Take Sarah, a graphic designer who spent years climbing the corporate ladder, only to be laid off abruptly. At first, it felt like the world had pulled the rug out from under her. But with no job tying her down, she finally experimented with her passion, illustrating children's books. 2 years later, her debut book won awards, and she realized losing that job wasn't a setback, it was liberation in disguise. The Stoics would say her layoff wasn't random, it was the universe's way of closing a door so she'd notice the window wide open. This isn't just optimism, it's a radical recalibration of how we perceive life's interruptions. Think of a river hitting a boulder. Does it stop? No. It finds a new route, carving landscapes more breathtaking than its original path. Rejection works the same way. When a relationship ends, it might feel like the story's over. But what if it's making space for a connection that aligns more deeply with who you're becoming? When a client rejects your proposal, could it be forcing you to refine an idea that'll later resonate with the right audience? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Fate weaves you into its design." Sometimes the thread feels rough, but it's still part of the fabric. Here's the practice hidden in this ancient idea. Next time you face rejection, pause and ask, what is this freeing me to pursue? Not as a hollow silver lining, but as a genuine excavation. The artist whose gallery submission is rejected might discover a more authentic style. The employee passed over for promotion might realize it's time to build their own venture. Sympathya whispers that every no is secretly a compass pointing you toward the opportunities that match your growth. So reflect on a recent rejection. Not with resentment, but curiosity. If this were redirection, where might it be leading? Because the Stoics knew something we often forget. Life isn't a straight line. It's a winding road where every blocked path is an invitation to explore terrain you'd never have chosen, but might one day thank yourself for traveling. Epictetus trained his students in an unusual way. He didn't just teach philosophy, he made them live it. Imagine walking through ancient Athens and seeing young men sleeping on hard ground in winter, wearing thin cloaks in the rain, even begging for food in the marketplace. This wasn't punishment, it was ascesis, the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort, a deliberate toughening of the mind like calluses forming on a laborer's hands. The logic was simple. If you willingly face small hardships, life's inevitable rejections lose their sting. As Epictetus put it, difficulties show men what they are. Think of it like vaccination. Just as a tiny dose of a virus trains your immune system, small doses of rejection inoculate your resilience. Modern research backs this. Exposure therapy, where people gradually face feared situations, rewires the brain's fear response. The Stoics were pioneers of this principle. They didn't wait for fate to humble them, they practiced humility daily. Seneca, despite his wealth, ate meager meals and wore rough clothing periodically. Why? To remind himself that comfort was a preference, not a necessity. Apply this to rejection. What if, instead of dreading the next no, you sought it out? Not masochism training. Here's a challenge straight from the Stoic playbook. For the next week, collect small rejections like badges of honor. Ask for a discount at a store where it's unlikely. Pitch an unconventional idea at work. Strike up a conversation with a stranger. Each no becomes a rep in your mental gym, not because you enjoy the sting, but because you're proving to yourself that you can survive it. A 21st century entrepreneur did this deliberately, getting rejected 100 days in a row, asking a stranger to borrow $100, requesting a burger refill at a restaurant. By day 30, he'd stopped flinching. By day 100, rejection felt like weather, something to notice, not something to fear. The brilliance of ascesis lies in its reframe. Most people see comfort as the goal. The Stoics saw it as the enemy of growth. Cold showers aren't about punishing the body, they're about reminding the mind, I choose this so I can endure what I don't. Rejection works the same way. When you voluntarily face small social risks, the big ones, job losses, broken relationships, don't topple you. You've already stood in the storm and learned to steady yourself. Epictetus, who endured slavery and physical disability, knew this truth intimately. The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. Voluntary discomfort reclaims that control. It's not about craving rejection, but about neutralizing its power. So tonight, try this. Turn down the thermostat 1 degree. Skip the extra scoop of dessert. Send that email you've been hesitating to write. Each small no you embrace or invite is a brick in the fortress of your resilience. Because the Stoics didn't just weather adversity, they built immunity to it, one voluntary challenge at a time. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that might shock our modern sensibilities. After describing a grueling illness, fever, chills, bones aching to the point where the very breathing was labor, he drops this bombshell: I give thanks for it. Not in spite of the suffering, but because of it. These are the gifts of adversity, he explains, that it shows us ourselves. That Stoic gratitude in its purest form, not just enduring rejection or pain, but mining it for the hidden jewels it leaves behind. Fast forward 2,000 years, and we've largely lost this art. Today's culture teaches us to lament setbacks. to post frustrated rants online, to see every no as a personal slight. But the Stoics whisper a counterintuitive truth. What if the rejections we resent are actually delivering exactly what we need? Consider someone recovering from a serious injury. At first, the forced stillness feels like prison until they notice something unexpected. Without the distractions of their usual routine, they start journaling. They reconnect with family. They discover a patience they never knew they had. That's Seneca's gift of adversity at work. The injury didn't just take, it revealed. Rejection operates the same way. When a startup founder gets rejected by investors for the 10th time, they might curse their luck. But in hindsight, those no's often force sharper pitches, leaner budgets, or even pivotal pivots. The Stoics would argue that rejection isn't withholding success, it's sculpting the version of you capable of sustaining it. Here's where MODERN Chinese letter, our tendency to complain blinds us. We treat rejection like a thief in the night, stealing what we believe we deserve. But the Stoics saw it as a stern teacher. Imagine two writers receiving identical rejection letters. One spirals into self-doubt, convinced the industry's against them. The other pores over the editor's notes, spotting patterns. Maybe their openings lag or their characters lack depth. Both faced the same event. Only one practiced Stoic gratitude, asking, "What is this here to show me?" That shift from victim to student is how no becomes nourishment. So here's your challenge. Next time rejection stings, borrow Seneca's lens. Ask not just why did this happen, but what could this make possible? When a relationship ends, does it create space to rediscover your independence? When a job falls through, does it nudge you toward a path better aligned with your strengths? Even health setbacks, while undeniably hard, often carry brutal but necessary messages about pacing, priorities, or self-care. The Stoics weren't masochists, they were realists. They understood that life's sharpest edges often carve our most valuable contours. Gratitude for rejection isn't about fake positivity. It's about trusting that growth wears many disguises, sometimes even the face of no. As Seneca reminds us, no tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds assail it. So the next time the winds blow hard, ask yourself, what roots might this storm be deepening? The answer might just reveal rejection's quietest, most transformative gift. After a rejection, there's often a second, quieter rejection, the one we inflict on ourselves. That voice whispering, "You weren't good enough," or "You'll never succeed." Marcus Aurelius knew this voice well. In his private journals, he called it the barking of your own opinions, not truth, just noise. The Stoics didn't deny self-doubt. They disarmed it with something far more powerful, objective self-talk. Imagine receiving a rejection letter and immediately hearing that inner critic hiss, "See, I told you you weren't cut out for this." Now picture Marcus's countermove, pausing to ask, is this thought useful? Is it based on fact or fear? That's the Stoic pivot from emotional reaction to rational examination. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics practiced. The stories we tell ourselves shape our reality. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, mirrors Marcus's approach by challenging distorted thinking. When your mind insists nobody values my work after one rejection, that's not analysis, it's catastrophizing. The Stoic remedy: strip the event bare. Instead of "I failed," try "one person said no today." See the difference? The first is a sweeping indictment. The second is a neutral fact waiting for your interpretation. Epictetus put it bluntly: man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. Your inner critic thrives on blurry generalizations. Clarity is its kryptonite. Here's a practice to try next time self-doubt flares up. Borrow Marcus's mantra: "This is my perception, not reality." Say it aloud, then play detective. Write down the rejection, e.g., the client chose someone else. Now list the facts, what was actually said or done, free from embellishment. Finally, note your story, the meaning you've attached. I'm bad at my job. Spot the gap, that's where your power lies. The Stoics called this prosauche, mindful attention to your judgments. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about refusing to let emotion dictate truth. Now shift the narrative. Ask yourself, what's a kinder story I could tell? Not empty positivity, everything happens for a reason, but grounded reframing. Maybe the client's choice reflects their needs, not your worth. Maybe this frees you for a better fit project. Marcus wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." Your inner critic wants to fossilize a moment into forever, your Stoic voice. It reminds you that stories can be rewritten. Think of a gardener pruning a plant. The cut feels like violence to the leaves, but the gardener knows this isn't destruction, it's direction. Rejection, viewed through Stoic eyes, works the same way. That inner critic shouting you're not enough, it's just a frightened part of you, not the whole truth. So next time it pipes up, thank it for its concern, then gently return to the facts. Because the Stoics knew a secret: when you stop fighting your own mind, rejection loses its fiercest ally. And that's when growth begins. Musonius Rufus, one of the most practical Stoic teachers, didn't just lecture about resilience, he built a community around it. While other philosophers debated abstract ideas, he gathered students in gardens and open courtyards, insisting that wisdom grows best in shared soil. His message was clear: facing rejection alone magnifies its sting, but weathering it alongside others transforms pain into progress. Picture a traveler stumbling in the dark versus one holding a lantern surrounded by companions. The obstacle doesn't change, but the journey does. This is the Stoic secret too many miss. Resilience isn't a solo act, it's a chorus. Seneca captured this beautifully in his letters. A single stick may snap easily, but bound together, no force can break them. He wasn't just crafting metaphors, he was describing the power of shared struggle. When a friend of his faced political exile, Seneca didn't offer empty platitudes. He became his lifeline, writing daily, dissecting setbacks, reframing losses as lessons. That's Stoic support in action, not pity, but partnership in growth. Today, we've swapped courtyards for comment sections, but the principle remains. Who's your Seneca, who reminds you, when rejection clouds your vision, that every no is fertilizer for the next yes? History's most resilient figures rarely operated in isolation. Marcus Aurelius had his Stoic tutors. Cato had allies who mirrored his integrity. Even Epictetus, after gaining freedom from slavery, built a school where students practiced resilience together. Modern research echoes this. Studies on rejection show that social buffers, mentors, peer groups, even online communities reduce the brain's stress response by up to half. The pain might still register, but it doesn't paralyze. So here's the challenge: after your next rejection, don't retreat. Reach out, not just for comfort, but for perspective. A writing group can spot blind spots in your rejected manuscript. A mastermind circle can reveal patterns in your job search. Even a single trusted voice can help you separate facts from the stories your fears are spinning. Musonius took this further. He taught that mentors aren't just for advice, they're living proof that survival is possible. When a student lamented a failed business venture, Musonius didn't theorize. He pointed to a scarred olive tree nearby. This trunk has survived droughts and storms, yet it still bears fruit. Will you do less? That's the alchemy of community. It turns wounds into wisdom by showing you others who have walked similar paths and emerged stronger. So ask yourself today, who in your circle embodies Stoic resilience? who asks the questions that unravel your self-doubt. If no one comes to mind, it's time to build your philosophical tribe. Online forums, local philosophy groups, even biographies of historical figures can serve as virtual mentors, because the Stoics knew something neuroscience now confirms. We don't just learn resilience, we catch it. Like a torch passed in darkness, every story of someone who faced rejection and kept moving forward becomes a beacon for your own journey. Seneca's letters often closed with a challenge: now go do likewise. So here's yours. Identify one person, living or historical, who's faced a rejection akin to yours and thrived. Study their steps, then share your story with someone a few steps behind you. Because the Stoic path was never meant to be walked alone. It's a road built by countless travelers, each leaving markers for those who follow. Your rejection isn't just your lesson, it's someone else's map. And that's how communities turn individual stumbles into collective strength. Marcus Aurelius often stared at the rushing waters of the Tiber River, watching leaves and debris swirl past here one moment, gone the next. Time is a river of passing events, he wrote, and strong is its current. That image captures Stoicism's core insight about impermanence. Everything changes, including the sting of rejection. Picture a tree in autumn. Today, its leaves blaze crimson. Tomorrow, they'll brown and fall. The tree doesn't cling or mourn, it adapts. Your rejected job application, the ignored text, the project that never got off the ground. They're just leaves in your personal season of change. The pain feels eternal, but the Stoics remind us nothing is. Modern life bombards us with the illusion of permanence, career ladders, lifelong relationships, unshakable identities. Yet the average person will switch jobs 12 times in their lifetime. Startups rise and collapse overnight. Even industries once considered untouchable, newspapers, retail giants, evaporate like morning mist. The Stoics would nod knowingly. Marcus scribbled in his journal, "All things fade into the storied past, and in a little while are shrouded in oblivion." That rejection email consuming your thoughts today. In a year, you might struggle to recall the hiring manager's name. The key isn't to dismiss the pain, but to place it in the vast flow of your unfolding story. Here's a practice to ground this idea. Next time rejection hits, ask, how will I remember this moment 12 months from now? Not as a rhetorical brush off, but as a literal exercise. Grab a notebook and fast forward mentally. Will this no feel like a footnote or a turning point? Chances are you'll spot a pattern. The setbacks that felt earth-shattering in the moment, the college rejection, the failed audition, often led to roads you'd never have chosen but now cherish. The Stoics called this premeditatio temporis, the premeditation of time's passage. It's not about minimizing your feelings, it's about widening the lens. Nature thrives on cycles of release and renewal. A forest fire isn't just destruction, it's how soil regenerates. Your career upheavals, romantic disappointments, even the dreams that never materialized, they're not dead ends. They're the necessary clearing for what's yet to grow. Consider how bamboo forests thrive. After years of invisible root growth underground, they suddenly shoot upward, sometimes a foot in a day. Your period of rejection might just be your rooting season. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he woke each day repeating, "You could leave life right now." Morbid, no liberating. By accepting life's fleeting nature, he freed himself to focus on what mattered. Apply that to rejection. That startup that folded, the relationship that ended, they weren't failures. They were experiences with expiration dates, teaching you what to carry forward and what to compost. So next time the wind of change knocks you off course, remember, even the mightiest oak sways. Its strength isn't in resisting the storm, but in knowing spring always comes again. Democritus, the ancient philosopher known as the laughing sage, had a peculiar habit that baffled his neighbors. He'd burst into laughter at the most unexpected moments. Watching people quarrel over trivial matters, obsess over fleeting fame, or crumble under minor setbacks, he found it all absurdly comical. The Stoics admired this perspective, not as mockery, but as liberation. When you can laugh at life's follies, including rejection, you strip them of their power to wound. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone told you that a certain person spoke ill of you, don't bother making excuses. Just reply, he must not know my other faults, or he would have mentioned those too. That's Stoic humor in action, not denying the sting, but refusing to let it dictate your joy. Picture an actor walking out of a disastrous audition. The director cut them off mid-monologue. They tripped over a prop. The room felt colder than a winter in Rome. Later, recounting the story to friends, they mimic the director's deadpan expression or the way their voice cracked on the last line. The embarrassment doesn't vanish, it just loses its fangs. That's the alchemy of laughter. It turns rejection from a tragedy into a comedy, not by ignoring the pain, but by refusing to let it sit in the director's chair of your life. The Stoics weren't advocating forced positivity. They knew humor works best when it's honest. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet joked about the absurdity of power in his private journals. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both ended up in the same place. Or Seneca, who quipped about his exile: if you're sent to live on a rock, start a philosophy school there. These weren't dodges, they were acts of defiance. Laughter became their way of saying, you can take my comfort but not my perspective. Here's the litmus test when you replay that cringe-worthy rejection: the botched presentation, the awkward date, the ignored application. Can you spot the absurdity yet? Not the manufactured, everything happens for a reason kind, but the genuine chuckle at life's unpredictable rhythms. The job interview where you spilled coffee on your resume. The text you sent with one too many exclamation points. These aren't failures, they're future punchlines. The Stoics would urge you to collect them like curiosities, each one proof that you're playing the game rather than spectating from the sidelines. Epictetus offered a radical exercise. When something irritates you, remember it's your judgment that irritates you, not the thing itself. Apply that to humor. The rejection email isn't funny, but your dramatic retelling of how you dramatically collapsed onto your sofa might be. The key isn't to laugh instead of feeling, but while feeling. Like a stand-up comedian mining their darkest moments for material, you're not erasing the pain, you're integrating it into your story. So next time life hands you a rejection, try this. Before you dissect what went wrong, ask, what about this might be funny later? Maybe it's the over-the-top self-pity playlist you made afterward. Maybe it's the way you practiced your pitch to the cat. The moment you can laugh even through gritted teeth, you've done something revolutionary. You've turned rejection from something that happens to you into something that happens for you. And that's a plot twist even Democritus would applaud. Seneca's exile to the barren island of Corsica should have been the end of his story. A wealthy philosopher banished, his reputation in ruins, his comfort stripped away. Instead, it became the birthplace of his most enduring works. With no political influence or audience, he turned inward, writing letters and essays that would outlast the empire that exiled him. What seemed like an ending was actually a creative detour, one that forced him to refine his ideas and communicate with unprecedented clarity. The Stoic lesson here is profound. Rejection doesn't erase your voice. It often demands you discover a new way to use it. This same alchemy turning no into creative fuel shapes modern stories too. Take J.K. Rowling, a single mother surviving on welfare when her Harry Potter manuscript faced rejection after rejection. Publishers called it too long, too slow, unmarketable, but each no didn't diminish her story, it refined her resolve. Years later, she reflected that those rejections were the best thing that could have happened. Why? Because they forced her to double down on the world she believed in, polishing it until even skeptics couldn't look away. What seemed like a blockade was actually a chisel, carving her raw idea into something diamond hard. Marcus Aurelius saw this principle everywhere. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. A fallen tree isn't just a barrier, it's a chance to build a bridge or blaze a new trail. Think of the musician whose album flops, pushing them to experiment with a genre that finally feels authentic, or the chef whose restaurant fails, leading them to a pop-up concept that becomes a sensation. Rejection doesn't just close doors, it redirects creative energy toward uncharted territory. The Stoics would argue that's its hidden purpose, to shake us out of ruts we didn't realize we were in. Here's the pivot that changes everything. Creative reinvention isn't about swapping goals, it's about expanding how you reach them. When one publisher rejected her detective novels, Agatha Christie didn't abandon writing. She sharpened her plots until they became irresistible. Thomas Edison didn't quit inventing after his electric vote recorder bombed. He realized, "I've found 50,000 ways not to make a light bulb." Both understood what Seneca knew: constraints breed ingenuity. Exile didn't silence him, it distilled his message. Rejection didn't break Rowling, it clarified her vision. So here's your challenge. Next time you face a creative no, ask, what if this isn't stopping my work but reshaping it? Maybe that declined gallery submission means your art belongs in street murals, not white cubes. Maybe the rejected business plan points you toward a niche market hungry for your idea. The Stoics didn't just endure setbacks, they mined them for clues. Your next breakthrough might not look like the path you planned, but as Marcus whispered to himself in the chaos of war, what stands in the way becomes the way. The rejection isn't the end of your story. It's the first line of a new chapter, one you wouldn't have written without it. Epictetus had a razor-sharp warning about our immediate reactions. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That tiny gap between the sting of rejection and your response is where Stoic power lives. Picture this: you check your phone to see a message from someone you admire, only to find they've left you on read. Your chest tightens, fingers hover over the keyboard, itching to fire off an angry text or desperate follow-up. That's the modern knee-jerk in action, a flood of cortisol hijacking your better judgment. The Stoics called these unchecked impulses the enemy within, because they hand control of your peace to whoever triggered them. Now contrast that with what happens when you insert a pause. Ancient Stoic students practiced prosauche mindful attention to their reactions. Before speaking or acting, they'd step back mentally, like a chess player surveying the board. Marcus Aurelius described it as taking the view from above, not suppressing emotion, but creating space to choose its expression. Modern neuroscience confirms this wisdom. Just 6 seconds of delay lets your prefrontal cortex override the amygdala's panic signals. That pause is your leverage point where rejection stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you respond through. Here's how to make it practical. Next time rejection hits a ghosted email, a critical comment, a missed opportunity, try this breathwork technique straight from Epictetus' playbook. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. The extended exhale triggers your parasympathetic nervous system, dialing down fight or flight. Use those seconds to ask, what would my best self do here? Not the bruised ego scrambling for comfort, but the version of you grounded in purpose. That tiny window changes everything. The ignored job application could become a chance to refine your portfolio. The harsh feedback might reveal a blind spot worth addressing. The magic lies in what doesn't happen in that pause. You don't send the passive-aggressive reply. You don't abandon a project after one, no. You sidestep the social media rant that would later make you cringe. History's most resilient figures mastered this art. When Nelson Mandela received yet another prison rejection letter during his 27-year incarceration, he used the interval between anger and action to strategize turning confinement into a crucible for leadership. As Epictetus observed, no great thing is created suddenly, neither is a great response. So here's your challenge for the next week: wear rejection like a lab coat, curious, detached, ready to observe. When the landlord denies your lease renewal or a colleague dismisses your idea, don't react, breathe. Probe the sensation like an anthropologist. Where do I feel this in my body? What story am I telling about what this means? That pause is where you'll find something astonishing. The power to rewrite rejection from a verdict into a question: what's next? Because the Stoics knew the truth we often forget: between stimulus and response, that's where your freedom lies, and it's always one breath away. Hierocles, the Stoic philosopher who envisioned humanity as a series of concentric circles, offered a radical antidote to resentment: compassion for those who reject us. Picture a stone dropped in water. The ripples start with self, then family, friends, community, and finally strangers. When someone says no, our instinct is to push them to the outermost edge, painting them as adversaries. But Hierocles urged the opposite: to draw them closer, to ask, what burdens might they be carrying that I can't see? Imagine a hiring manager who ghosted your application. The ego screams, they disrespected me. The Stoic adjusts the lens. What if they're drowning in hundreds of resumes or facing personal turmoil? This isn't about excusing poor behavior. It's about recognizing that rejection is rarely personal. It's usually just someone else's limitations echoing outward. Marcus Aurelius, who faced constant political betrayal, wrote in his journal, "When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it." Once you understand, you'll feel sympathy rather than outrage. That shift from "how dare they" to "what led them here" unlocks a profound emotional freedom. Take a workplace snub. A colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Resentment burns, whispering, "They're out to get me," but the Stoic pauses. Maybe that colleague is insecure, fearing their job's at risk. Maybe they've been conditioned to equate survival with self-promotion. Understanding doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means refusing to let someone else's struggles become your prison. Here's the paradox: compassion for rejectors isn't weakness, it's strategic strength. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to suffer. It fixates on the uncontrollable, their actions, while draining energy from what you can control, your growth. Seneca, who forgave the emperor who exiled him, noted, "Anger is temporary madness." Contrast two employees after a promotion denial. One obsesses over the unfair boss, their bitterness poisoning future collaborations. The other considers, did the boss have pressures I don't know about? Then they redirect focus, upskilling, seeking mentors, even exploring roles elsewhere. The first stays stuck. The second transforms rejection into momentum. This practice isn't about being a doormat. Stoic compassion has teeth. It's the difference between "they hurt me because they're evil" and "they hurt me because they're human, and I'll adjust accordingly." Epictetus, enslaved and crippled by a cruel master, later taught, "Every person acts according to their own understanding of good." That master wasn't a monster. He was a misguided man who equated power with brutality. Understanding that didn't excuse his actions. It freed Epictetus from wasting life hating someone who'd never repent. So the next time rejection stings, try hierarchical circles. Pull that person, the dismissive client, the flaky friend, the critical stranger, a ring closer. ask what's their story, not to absolve them but to release yourself. Because the Stoics knew a secret, resentment chains you to the past while compassion frees you to build the future. And in that space between understanding and action, you'll find something unexpected, not just thicker skin but a lighter heart. Seneca once wrote to his friend Lucilius about a sculptor who worked tirelessly on a statue hidden in his basement. When asked why he labored over something no one would ever see, the artist replied, "Because the gods see." That story captures the Stoic redefinition of success, a shift from applause in the marketplace to integrity in the workshop of your soul. Most of us chase validation like starving dogs after scraps, promotions to impress acquaintances, social media metrics that spike our dopamine, relationships we flaunt like trophies. But Seneca warned, what's the point of having a statue's head polished to perfection if your own is full of cracks? True success, to the Stoics, wasn't about the laurels others placed on your brow, but the quiet knowledge that you'd lived by your own uncompromising standards. Consider two painters. The first obsesses over gallery openings and sales, altering her style to match trends. The second works in a dim garage, layering colors until they match the vision in her mind, even if the canvases stack up unsold. Who's the successful one? Conventional metrics would crown the first, but Stoic wisdom points to the second. Why? Because her compass is internal. Every stroke is measured against her own artistic truth, not the fickle tastes of critics. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, measured his days by a private ledger. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, not be praised as one. Not be remembered as one, simply be. This isn't abstract idealism, it's tactical armor against life's unpredictability. When a musician's album flops commercially, the artist chasing fame unravels. But the one who created music that felt true, they might shrug and say, "I made what only I could make." That's Stoic metrics in action, separating the uncontrollable reception from the controllable craft. History's most enduring works, Van Gogh's Starry Night, Emily Dickinson's poems stuffed in drawers, were often created far from the spotlight's approval. Their creators understood what Seneca penned in exile. He who is brave is free, not free from rejection, but free from letting rejection define worth. Here's your litmus test. Imagine achieving your greatest goal, publishing the book, launching the business, finding the partner, but no one ever acknowledges it. Would the achievement still glow with meaning? If the answer wavers, that's where Stoic practice begins. Journal each evening not about what you accomplished, but how you showed up. Did you act with courage when fear whispered? Did you choose integrity over convenience? That's your real ledger. The poet Rilke wrote letters to a young aspirant, urging, "Ask yourself in the stillest hour of your night, must I write? Not should I, or will I be celebrated, but must I?" That's the artist's and the Stoic North Star. Success isn't the applause when the curtain rises. It's the certainty that you'd have danced just as fiercely in an empty theater. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, ask Seneca's question: if all the world ignored me tomorrow, what would still be worth doing? The answer isn't just your definition of success, it's the blueprint of your unshakable self. Cleans, the Stoic philosopher who famously worked as a water carrier by night to support his studies, understood something profound about the power of ritual. While his peers debated abstract theories, he embraced the physicality of labor, the ache in his shoulders, the blisters on his palms, as a way to ground philosophy in the body. This wasn't just about paying bills, it was a deliberate practice of embodying resilience. The Stoics knew that letting go of rejection isn't just a mental exercise, it's something we need to feel in our bones. That's where rituals come in. Imagine holding a rejection letter that's been weighing on your mind for weeks. Now picture striking a match and watching the paper curl into smoke. The act isn't about destruction, it's about transformation. You're not erasing the experience, you're reclaiming its energy. Fire has always been humanity's great alchemist, turning the solid into the ephemeral. When you burn that letter, you're not just disposing of paper, you're viscerally releasing its grip on you. But rituals don't require pyrotechnics. The key is tactile engagement, something to bridge the gap between thought and action. Try this. Write down the rejection that's been circling your mind, then tear the paper into confetti. Or bury it in soil with a seed, letting the compost of disappointment nourish new growth. The Stoics would approve of such symbolism. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about returning to the earth as a way to contextualize struggles. What feels like an ending is just part of nature's cycle. These acts work because they externalize the internal. The crumpled paper, the scattered ashes, the planted seed, they're physical proof that you've chosen to metabolize the experience rather than let it fester. Clean's manual labor offers another ritual template, purposeful exhaustion. When rejection leaves you mentally spinning, channel that energy into something concrete. Chop wood, knead bread, paint a wall. The goal isn't productivity, it's recalibration. Physical fatigue has a way of quieting the mind's chatter, creating space for perspective. Modern science confirms this. Rhythmic, repetitive motion like sweeping or sanding activates the parasympathetic nervous system, dialing down stress hormones. The Stoic twist: pair the activity with a mantra. As your hands work, repeat Epictetus' question. Is this within my control? With each stroke or stitch, you're not just moving your body, you're retraining your focus toward what you can influence. Here's your challenge this week. Design a letting go ritual. It could be as simple as writing a rejection on a helium balloon and releasing it, or as elaborate as a failure feast where you share stories of setbacks over a meal. The form doesn't matter, the intention does. Rituals work because they mark a boundary between then and now, giving your subconscious permission to move forward. Seneca practiced this nightly, reviewing his day and mentally discarding what didn't serve him. He called it sealing the day's account. You're not pretending the rejection didn't happen. You're declaring that it won't define what happens next. The final step: celebrate the release. The Stoics weren't ascetics. They understood the power of joy as a counterbalance to hardship. After your ritual, do something that reminds you of your aliveness. Dance to a favorite song, savor a piece of dark chocolate, call someone who makes you laugh. This isn't frivolous, it's strategic. You're rewiring your brain to associate rejection with resilience, not paralysis. Just as Cleans found dignity in his water jars, you'll find freedom in the act of letting go, not because the pain disappears, but because you've proven you can carry it without being crushed by its weight. Marcus Aurelius often climbed the steps of his palace at dawn to practice what he called the view from above, a mental exercise where he'd imagine his life as a single brushstroke on the vast canvas of history. From that height, even crushing setbacks shrank to fleeting moments. Think of the whole universe, he wrote, and how small the space between birth and oblivion really is. That's Stoic legacy thinking in action, the practice of measuring rejection not by its immediate sting, but by its place in the arc of your growth. Consider Harriet Tubman, who endured relentless rejection, enslaved, injured, dismissed, yet channeled each no into fuel for her mission. Decades later, those who doubted her were footnotes, while her legacy illuminated history. As Seneca reminded his friend Lucilius, time discovers truth. What feels like a rejection today might be the pivot point your future self thanks you for. Legacy thinking isn't about dismissing pain, it's about contextualizing it. Picture a novelist whose manuscript is rejected by 20 publishers. In the moment, each no feels like a body blow, but zoom out, those rejections could push them toward an independent press that champions their voice, or force revisions that make the book timeless. The Stoics called this subspecie aeternitas, seeing things under the aspect of eternity. Your current rejection isn't isolated. It's woven into a larger narrative you're still writing. When Thomas Edison's lab burned down, destroying years of work, he reframed the disaster. Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up. Now we can start fresh. That's legacy thinking, recognizing that setbacks aren't in points, but plot twists in a story too long to judge mid-chapter. Here's the litmus test Seneca prescribed. Place before your eyes the vast stretch of time and consider the universe. Apply that to your own life. The job you didn't get, the relationship that ended, the opportunity that slipped away. How will they resonate in 10 years? Will they be scars or catalysts? Beethoven's deafness should have ended his career. Instead, it birthed compositions that redefined music. His rejection of conventional limits became his legacy. The Stoics would urge you to ask, what if this rejection is the very thing that forces me to innovate, to persist, to outgrow my old self? Try this exercise tonight. Grab a notebook and sketch 2 timelines. On the first, mark your past rejections: academic, professional, personal. Note how many now seem trivial, even beneficial. On the second, project forward 5 years. Where might today's rejection appear on that line? A minor dip, a turning point. The act of drawing it shrinks the monster under the bed back to its true size, a shadow, not a beast. Marcus Aurelius left us a final clue in his journals. You've lived as a citizen in a great city, 5 years or 50. What's the difference? The rejections that feel seismic now will one day be artifacts of your evolution. So breathe deep, adjust your gaze to the horizon, and remember, legacy isn't built in the absence of no's. It's forged by how you let them redirect you toward the yeses that echo across time. Epictetus saw envy as a peculiar kind of theft, not of possessions but of peace. Comparison, he warned, is the robbery of joy. Picture this: you've just been passed over for a promotion, and within minutes, you're scrolling through a former colleague's vacation photos, azure waters, golden sunsets, captions dripping with achievement. That gnawing in your gut isn't just disappointment. It's the toll of measuring your raw, unedited life against someone else's highlight reel. The Stoics diagnosed this centuries before Instagram existed. When we fixate on others' trajectories, we abandon our own. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a remedy in his journal. Be like the promontory against which the waves continually break. It stands firm while the turbulent waters settle around it. Your path isn't defined by someone else's milestones, but by the ground you choose to stand on. Social media didn't invent comparison, it weaponized it. Ancient Greeks envied their neighbors' olive harvests. We torture ourselves with infinite scrolls of curated success. Algorithms thrive on this vulnerability, feeding us relentless benchmarks. The friend who launched a startup at 22, the influencer whose hustle seems effortless, the peer whose life looks like a perpetual victory lap. But here's what those feeds omit: the sleepless nights, the rejections edited out, the quiet struggles buried under filters. Seneca, observing Rome's elite, noted, "No one keeps their troubles hidden better than those most envied." The Stoic antidote, a ruthless focus on proherses, your sphere of control. Instead of asking why them, ask what's the next right step for me. Consider 2 gardeners. One obsesses over the blossoms in their neighbor's plot, fretting over why their own roses aren't as tall. The other tends to the soil in front of them, watering, pruning, trusting the season. Both might face droughts, but only the second harvests resilience. That's the power of inward focus. When a rejection triggers envy, the Stoics would urge you to excavate its root. What am I really craving? Is it the title your coworker earned, or the confidence it represents? The travel photos or the freedom they symbolize? Often, envy is a distorted mirror reflecting not what we lack, but what we've yet to claim for ourselves. Here's the pivot: turn comparison into calibration. Musonius Rufus taught that observing others' strength should inspire refinement, not resentment. If a peer's success stings, dissect it objectively. Did they network more strategically, develop skills you've neglected, use their example as a whetstone, not a whip? The entrepreneur whose growth you envy probably endured rejections you never saw. The artist with viral acclaim likely painted 100 ignored canvases first. Progress isn't linear, and the Stoics knew visibility not equal to value. Your unseen efforts, the rejected proposals, the silent study sessions, the small acts of courage are building a foundation no algorithm can quantify. So tonight, try Epictetus' experiment. List 3 ways you've grown in the past year, not relative to anyone else, but to your former self. Maybe you navigated a difficult conversation with more grace. Maybe you finally set a boundary. These are your true milestones. Then, ask the question that silences comparison's noise. What does fulfillment look like for me? Unfiltered, uncompared, uncompromised. The answer might not fit in a caption or a likes counter, but it will fit the life you're actually living, one rejection, one lesson, one quiet victory at a time. Let's bring this full circle. The Stoic strategy for transforming rejection isn't about numbing yourself to pain, it's about alchemizing it. Start with the dichotomy of control, that liberating split between what's yours to command and what isn't. The job application, the pitch, the vulnerable confession: you control the effort, never the outcome. Then there's Amor, Fati, the fierce embrace of fate. Every no isn't just something to endure, it's something to love for the redirection it offers, like a river carving a smarter path through stone. And finally, reframing. Rejection isn't a verdict on your worth, but feedback on your approach. The Stoics didn't just tolerate setbacks, they treated them as their gymnasium, the place where resilience gets sculpted one heavy lift at a time. Seneca, who turned exile into enlightenment, left us these razor-sharp words: a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. That's the heart of it. Your rejections aren't roadblocks, they're the grit that polishes you into someone unshakable. So here's my challenge to you. Think of a time a no forced you to grow in ways a yes never could. Share it below. Your story might be the torch that helps someone else through their own dark stretch. And if you're ready to keep sharpening your Stoic toolkit, hit subscribe. Together, we'll turn life's hardest blows into the anvil that forges your strongest self. The next time rejection comes knocking, you'll know exactly how to greet it, not as an enemy, but as your most unexpected teacher.